They won't understand why you walk alone. They'll say you've changed, that you've become distant, cold. They'll call it isolation, detachment, maybe even arrogance. Let them, because what they can't see is that solitude is not your weakness, it's your weapon. Nietzsche didn't walk the crowded path. He walked the edge of thought, where few dared to go. Not because he loved the silence, but because the truth he chased couldn't survive the noise. You see, when you walk with the crowd, you inherit their pace, their fears, their opinions. You become them, in pieces, until you forget where you end and they begin. But when you walk alone, you hear something else. You hear the hum of your own mind, the questions no one else will ask, the discomfort no one else wants to face. And that's where transformation begins, not in company, in confrontation with yourself. Nietzsche called it becoming who you are, not who the world told you to be, not who your friends expect you to be, but the self that exists underneath it all, unfiltered, unafraid, unapologetically you. But to find that self, you must be willing to lose everything else, the comforts, the validation, the false sense of belonging. And that's what makes the walk so hard, because solitude reveals things you were never meant to escape from, the flaws you buried, the truth you denied, the parts of yourself you swore you'd never face. But Nietzsche didn't run from it. He welcomed it, because only in that fire, in that unbearable stillness, can the old version of you burn away. So yes, walk alone, not because you hate the world, but because you've finally chosen to stop being ruled by it, because you'd rather be at war with your own demons than at peace in a crowd that never knew your name, because you understand what Nietzsche knew, that the path to greatness is not walked in echoes, it's carved in silence. You'll be misunderstood, you'll be questioned, you'll be left behind, but you'll be free, free to think, free to become, free to build something real, not for applause, but for yourself. That is the price of authenticity. That is the path of the Übermensch, the one who walks alone, because they've chosen evolution over acceptance. And in the end, you won't need them to understand, because when they look back and see what you built in solitude, they'll know you didn't walk away from them. You walk towards something greater. They will offer you comfort, soft hands, kind smiles, a seat at their table, as long as you don't speak too loudly, as long as you don't question the rules, as long as you shrink just enough to fit their frame. And for a moment, it's tempting to belong, to be seen, to be safe. But Nietzsche knew comfort is the enemy of elevation, because nothing strong is born from ease. No philosopher, no artist, no leader ever rose from the crowd's applause. They rose from exile, from long nights and longer silences, from walking roads no one else dared to take. When you walk alone, you lose the illusion, the safety net, the false friends who loved your compliance more than your truth, and you're left with only yourself. That's where most turn back, because facing yourself is the most violent confrontation there is. Nietzsche did not retreat. He wrote in the madness. He stood in the fire, and from that fire, he forged a new kind of man, a man untethered from dogma, unchained from systems, beyond good and evil, the Übermensch, not a god, not a monster, but someone who had walked so far beyond the herd that he could never return, and no longer needed to, because once you've tasted real freedom, the crowd feels like a prison. Every smile, an anchor, every nod, another chain. So you keep walking, not because it's easy, but because going back would kill something in you. You learn to eat in silence, to grow without praise, to fight without witnesses, and slowly, the loneliness becomes something else, a forge, a sacred place, where all falsehood burns, and only truth remains. The man who walks alone learns the language of the abyss, and in that abyss, he learns to speak his own name with clarity, with conviction, with fire. The mountain doesn't lower itself for the valley. It doesn't apologize for its height. It doesn't bend to make others feel tall. It simply stands, cold, distant, untouched. That's what greatness feels like. You rise, and the air gets thinner. Fewer voices, fewer handshakes, fewer smiles, because the higher you go, the harder it is to be understood. You'll look down and see the world still spinning in noise, in gossip, in distraction, and you'll wonder if it's worth it to keep climbing, to keep walking alone, to keep trading comfort for clarity. Nietzsche would say yes, without hesitation, because at the summit, you don't just see the world, you see through it. You see the machinery behind morality, the fear behind conformity, the truth behind tradition. And once you see it, you can't go back. You realize most people aren't living. They're copying, replicating patterns they never chose, speaking words they never questioned, living lives they never examined. But you questioned everything, even yourself, especially yourself. And that's why you're dangerous. Because the man who walks alone doesn't just escape the world, he becomes immune to it. The insults don't reach. The praise doesn't blind. The noise is just weather against stone. You no longer seek agreement. You seek alignment. And those who can't match your frequency, they fall away. Not because you pushed them, but because your silence revealed their noise. You're not cruel. You're clear. And that clarity, that sharpness of mind, that detachment from the pull of the crowd, that's the birth of true power. It's not loud, it's not popular, it doesn't need validation. It just is. Like the mountain, ruthless, silent, unshakable. They romanticize solitude, but they don't tell you what it really feels like. They don't tell you that silence can scream, that the absence of noise reveals something far more terrifying. Your own mind, raw and unfiltered. Nietzsche didn't just walk alone, he descended into himself, into the very depths of thought, where most men are too afraid to look. And what he found there wasn't peace, it was pain, it was contradiction, it was the death of every comforting lie he had ever believed. That's what solitude does. It doesn't polish you, it shatters you, and then it forces you to rebuild. One truth at a time. You begin to question everything. Why do I believe this? Where did that thought come from? Whose voice is that in my head? My own, or someone else's? The crowd can't survive this level of honesty. But Nietzsche lived in it. He broke the rules of morality. He tore down inherited systems. He attacked comfort, religion, tradition, not out of hate, but out of necessity. Because he understood something most never will, that to become fire, you must burn first. You must let the false version of yourself die, the agreeable one, the pleasing one, the obedient one. That version of you was never real. It was manufactured by expectation, molded by fear, controlled by reward and punishment. And when you sit in true solitude, that version of you starts to decay. You feel it. The old skin peeling away, and underneath it, something wild, something real. But it hurts. It hurts to evolve, to let go of who you were, to detach from who they told you to be. And Nietzsche knew pain like that. He knew madness. He lived with trembling hands and eyes full of lightning, not because he was weak, but because he dared to hold the entire weight of human thought in his bare hands. He wasn't just a philosopher. He was a conduit for something primal, something beyond reason, something divine. But the gods don't come bearing gifts, they come bearing fire. And Nietzsche burned, his mind stretched to its limit, his body collapsed, his voice faded into silence, and in that silence, he vanished, not into weakness, but into immortality. Because the man who walked alone became the voice that echoes through every modern mind that refuses to kneel. You feel it, don't you? That whisper in your chest, telling you that there's more, that comfort isn't enough, that applause doesn't matter, that there's a truth in you deeper than any doctrine, older than any belief. That's the fire. That's what Nietzsche was chasing. And to reach it, you must go alone. No map, no guide, just the silence and the storm. You'll lose people. You'll lose illusions. You'll lose everything that made you small. But what you gain in return is weightless. It's freedom. It's self-possession. It's the kind of strength that can't be taken, because it wasn't given. You built it, brick by bloody brick, in the cold, in the dark, in the moments no one saw, and no one celebrated. And when you emerge, if you emerge, you won't need validation. You won't need a crowd. You won't even need to speak, because power like that, it radiates. It bends the room. It changes the atmosphere. The world will look at you and feel something they can't name, something ancient, something dangerous, something that says this man has walked through fire, and he did not flinch. They taught you about good and evil, about right and wrong, about heroes and villains. They fed you a story, simple, clean, easy to digest, a world painted in black and white. But Nietzsche, he saw through it. He saw the lie. He saw that what they call good is often just obedience in disguise, and what they call evil is often nothing more than unapproved freedom. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You begin to feel it everywhere, in politics, in religion, in family, in culture, the pressure to conform, the unspoken rules, the subtle punishments for being too much of yourself. That's the real war. Not between good and evil, but between the individual and the system that fears his awakening. Because once a man walks beyond good and evil, he becomes dangerous, not violent, not reckless, but free. Free from the chains of shame, free from borrowed guilt, free from the constant aching need to be approved. Nietzsche called this man the Übermensch, not a tyrant, but a creator, not a destroyer, but a forger of values. Someone who no longer lives by rules he didn't write. Someone who no longer begs for permission to exist. That kind of man doesn't fit into society. He redefines it. But to reach that level, you must die, not physically, but symbolically. You must let go of the stories you were given. You must unlearn the morality that was injected into you like poison dressed as medicine. You must kill the echo, the one that says, be careful, don't stand out, don't make them uncomfortable. That voice isn't yours. It never was. It's the voice of 1,000 tiny chains, each one forged by someone too afraid to walk alone. Let them keep their chains. You've outgrown them. This is the final stage, the place where solitude becomes sovereignty, where silence becomes vision. You've walked through the loneliness. You've endured the collapse. You've stared into the abyss. And now the abyss stares back in reverence. You are no longer afraid of your own mind. You are no longer running from your shadows. You are whole, not perfect, not pure, but whole, because you've accepted every part of yourself, the noble, the cruel, the light, the dark, the sacred and the savage. This is what it means to transcend, not to become better than others, but to become indifferent to comparison. You stop measuring yourself by their metrics, their wealth, their status, their applause. You measure yourself by one thing only: how real am I? How deeply have I lived my truth, regardless of cost? And in that truth, you find something the crowd will never know: peace. Not the peace that comes from fitting in, but the peace that comes from no longer needing to. Now you walk differently. You speak with fewer words. You look people in the eye, and they look away, not because you're cruel, but because you're clear, because your presence forces them to see everything they've denied in themselves. You've become a mirror, and most can't handle their reflection, but a few will. A few will see you and feel something ancient awaken inside them, not admiration, but recognition. They'll feel the echo of their own potential, their own buried fire, and maybe, just maybe, your walk will inspire theirs. But you won't wait for them. You won't beg them to understand. You'll keep walking, because you don't do this for them. You do this for truth, for freedom, for the sheer brutal beauty of living without lies. So now, you stand alone, not because you couldn't belong, but because you chose not to betray yourself.
You walked through the storm. You died to the old self. You became fire. And now, in the stillness that follows, you realize something: you were never alone. Because solitude isn't the absence of connection. It's the presence of realness. The deeper you go into yourself, the closer you get to something eternal. Not God, not religion, not doctrine, but being itself. The raw pulse of existence, unfiltered, unapologetic, alive. That's what Nietzsche found. Not answers, but the courage to live without them. He didn't give you a map. He gave you a mirror. And now, it's yours. Look into it. Not with fear, not with hope, but with eyes wide open. What do you see? If the answer is, I see someone becoming, then you're already on the path of the one who walks alone. You were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be undeniable.